Well, welcome everybody to week 5 of our November online program for the alumni of the Sunshine Coast Health Center. And this month, we've been talking about what are the key themes that have been coming up over the last 2 years of the online program, right? So we've talked about being the author of your life. We've talked about asking what life demands of you. We've talked about the idea that happiness is a byproduct of living a personally meaningful life. And we've talked about having an attitude towards suffering, one that you can use to your advantage. Okay? So this week, let's see if we can pull it all together. And we'll take a real life example. Now, I've talked to most of you, I think, about this story of Ian Harrod, the fellow I personally was in recovery with. And just to refresh your memory, Ian and his brother, at 5 years old, lost both parents in a car accident. So they both end up in an orphanage. And during this time, Ian was a very angry kid. And he would be acting out, and when they placed him with a family, he never lasted very long. He'd be, I don't know, throwing temper tantrums, breaking windows, all that. Very few people could handle him. So back to the orphanage. And he was getting into all sorts of trouble. And when he was a little older, all of a sudden his brother got adopted out, so he was stuck there. Now he'd lost his brother, so he's even more angry. So he started doing drugs, stealing cars. And he did enough of that up until he was 16 years old, and then he got sent to prison for, as I understand it, for 2 years. And he turned 2 years into 8 years, just to give you a sense of what a rabble-rouser this guy was in jail. Anyway, so this was Ian's life, in and out of jail, having car chases, robbing people, dealing drugs, doing all this stuff. Just a big long prison sentence interspersed with gaps when he got out and did more heroin. And that was his life up until the early 40s. And then in the early 40s, he got into his mind that, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. Like, this is no life at all, right? So I better do something with my life. So Ian really didn't know what to do. So he got the brilliant idea that he would phone up Crime Stoppers and rat on himself. So that's actually what he did. And of course, because it was Ian, the people who showed up at the door had guns drawn, and unfortunately shot Ian in the leg. At any rate, Ian ends up in a hospital for a bit while they fix his leg, and it comes back, and then that's when I met him. Right? So I'm in recovery with him, and then after a few months of recovery, he goes back, and his idea is he's going to thank the nurse who took care of him at the hospital. Apparently, though, that this nurse actually never even existed. And in Ian's creative imagination, he got to thinking that maybe what he thought was the nurse was actually an angel. And then he thought, well, there's nothing special about me. If I have an angel, that means everybody else has an angel. And so he would start to live his life based on this idea that everybody's got an angel. So if Ian were to meet somebody, in Ian's mind, he would think, okay, my angel brought me together with this fellow, so there's something important here happening. So I have to figure out what it is. And literally, this is how the guy would live his life. When he cleaned up as well, I mean, he was told basically by the doctors, you have no more than 5 years to live, because he had really beaten himself up and got some diseases, and he was actually a medical mess. At any rate, Ian, his work was helping other addicts, right? And it was really quite remarkable, because he had a smile on his face. He worked very long hours. If someone phoned him up at 3 in the morning, he'd be there. He was a sponsor in the 12-step program. Like, it was quite remarkable, the things he did. Never complained about his health, nothing like that. And when I tell people the story of Ian, people who knew him, either from his work or in the 12-step program, they're always shocked. So, really? How's that possible? I mean, the story you're telling me is he was suffering horribly, and yet every time I saw Ian, he had a smile on his face. And this is the remarkable thing. And so this is how Ian lived his life up until the night he died, when he actually got married. In fact, the night before he died is he got married. Finally found love, right? And if you think about this story of Ian, he's put these 4 things we've been talking about this month into practice. 1, he recognized he got to make choices. He was the author of his life. And this was important because all his life he'd never really met choices. I mean, people have been throwing him in jail and he was dictated by his drug addiction. And in recovery, he said, look, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired, so I want to live like as good a life as I can, right? So he made choices. Got into a job that allowed him to do this, and took care of his health as best he could, but as I said, he had a lot of illnesses. But anyway, he started taking control of his life. Second thing he did is he didn't make any demands on life. He started joining in with life. So here's a guy who was like against everything for most of his life, and all of a sudden gets the idea of joining in with life. Or Viktor Frankl's comment, asking, what does life demand of me? Okay, so if I have these medical issues, what does that demand of me? Well, I better take my medications and go see the doctor and all that. Or if I'm working in this field, helping other suffering addicts, what does that demand of me? Well, if they phone me up at 3 in the morning and I've told them they can do it, then that demands that I get up at 3 o'clock in the morning and help them, or at least talk to them on the phone. Right? Taking all of what is out there in life and joining with the flow. Right? Happiness for Ian was definitely not the absence of suffering, because I saw him every day, and there's no question he suffered. But he always had this smile on his face. Right? It was really quite remarkable. So it wasn't the absence of suffering, but he had figured out how to live his life in a way that made him feel good, and that was enough to overcome all the physical suffering, and plus all the other stuff too. I mean, when he was in active addiction, he got married a couple of times, and they weren't, from what I understand, they were not particularly great marriages. And his attitude towards suffering was really remarkable, because it was very realistic. I mean, he knew he was going to suffer physically, and that he had a lot of issues to deal with. I mean, he had recognized all that. But one of the things that he seems to have done is he had learned from his past, and he had taken that and grown from it and become stronger for overcoming it. So he had the right attitude towards suffering. And in fact, I remember talking to Ian, and he would talk about it as a gift. That recovery was a gift, and that he was so thankful that he was an addict. So it was really quite remarkable. And as I said, I was going to kick out of this one. The night before he died, he got married. Finally found love. So it all worked out. Anyway, I think Ian is a very good example of someone who has used these 4 things that we've talked about this month and used them to his advantage, and somehow overcame a life that would make a Hollywood movie, right? And he was able to do this. And when he passed away, a group of people got together, and they made a plaque for him, which is now in a treatment center in the Lower Mainland. And this plaque says, "Have yourself a good day if you so choose." And that was Ian's favorite saying. He recognized it was his choice. And so this man who was suffering and had no real family and all that, somehow recognized that still it was his life. And he could make choices. And these choices could be for his benefit or for his detriment. And he chose them for his benefit. So I thought it was a good way to end off our November online program with this example of a man who had put all of these main themes into practice in his life. And he did pass away. Oh, by the way, he passed away 8 years after the doctors told him that he only had 5 years to live. Sounds great. At any rate, that's November, and December's coming up, and we'll be back with another topic. See you then.